My sister-in-law almost killed my son by giving him nuts knowing he's allergic. When I found out she did it on purpose, I exposed her and now she lost her own daughter forever. I'm 32 years old. My name is Jennifer. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer. And what happened 6 months ago with my sister-in-law, Victoria almost killed my son Ethan. And when I say she almost killed him, I'm not being dramatic. He literally was on the verge of dying because she decided to give him something she knew perfectly well could kill him. I still have trouble sleeping thinking about what could have happened if things had gone just a little bit differently that day. I guess I should start from the beginning so everything makes sense. My husband Ryan and I have been married for like 8 years. We met in college and basically fell in love from day one. You know, that typical cheesy love at first sight story that I never thought would happen to me. We have Ethan, who's now 4.5, and he's literally the light of my life. That kid has me completely wrapped around his little finger. The problem with Ethan, and it's a big problem, is that he has a severe nut allergy, like the kind of allergy where if he eats a microscopic piece of peanut, he can end up in the hospital or worse. We found out when he was about 2 years old. Ryan gave him a piece of peanut butter because I wasn't home and we didn't know he was allergic. And we ended up in the ER with Ethan, swollen like a balloon and unable to breathe properly. It was horrible, absolutely terrifying. And since that day, we've been super careful with everything he eats. Ryan's family is big. I mean, he has 2 brothers and a sister, Victoria, who's the oldest. Victoria has always been like the black sheep of the family. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but she's always had this air of superiority mixed with resentment, like the world owed her something. She has a daughter, Lily, who's now 5 years old and is basically an angel. That girl is so sweet and loving that sometimes I wonder how it's possible that Victoria is her mother. Victoria was married to Marcus, who's a really decent guy, hardworking, good father. But she left him like 2 years ago because according to her, she deserved something better. Marcus was devastated, honestly, but eventually he got shared custody of Lily, though Victoria had the girl most of the time because she convinced the judge that she was the primary caregiver. I always had my reservations about Victoria, I'm not going to lie. There was something about her that made me nervous. Like that feeling you get when you know someone isn't being completely honest with you but you can't pinpoint exactly what it is. Ryan always told me I was exaggerating, that Victoria was his sister, and that despite her flaws, she wasn't a bad person, and I wanted to believe him because, well, she was his sister and I didn't want to be that typical daughter-in-law who causes family problems. But there were signs, little things that bothered me. Like that time she brought Lily home with a nasty bruise on her arm and said she had fallen, but Lily seemed scared. When we asked her what had happened, or when we found Lily eating from the trash at a family gathering because Victoria had forgotten to bring her lunch and she was too embarrassed to ask for food. Things like that make you think, but that also aren't enough to do something about it. The thing about Ethan's allergy was something the whole family knew perfectly well. We had explained it 1,000 times. We had signs at our family gatherings. I always sent special food for Ethan when we went to someone's house. Victoria had been present in several conversations about this. She was even there once when Ethan had a minor reaction because a kid at the park gave him a candy that had traces of nuts. She saw how hysterical I got, how we ran with the EpiPen, the whole situation. There was no way she didn't know how serious this was. Absolutely no way. So we get to the day that changed everything. It was a Saturday in May. I remember because there were cherry blossoms everywhere, and I was super excited because it was my favorite season. I woke up feeling horrible, like my throat hurt. I had a fever. I felt like a truck had run me over. Ryan was out of town for work. He had a conference in Chicago and wasn't coming back until Monday. I was in bed trying not to infect Ethan, who was super bored because I had promised to take him to the adventure park that day, one of those places with giant inflatable games and stuff. I felt terrible about disappointing him. That kind of mother's guilt you feel when your kid is sad because of you. And then Victoria called. She told me that Lily wouldn't stop talking about going to the adventure park and that she had heard Ethan was going to go, and that if I wanted, she could take Ethan with Lily so they could both have fun together. At first I said no, because something in my stomach told me it was a bad idea. But Ethan heard me talking on the phone and started begging me, with those little eyes he has, that completely melt me. And Victoria sounded so sincere, so genuinely willing to help, that I thought maybe I was being unfair to her. Maybe I was judging her too harshly. Maybe it was my chance to improve our relationship, right? So I finally said yes. But I gave her super clear instructions about Ethan's allergy. I repeated like 5 times that he couldn't eat anything with nuts, that he carried his EpiPen in his little backpack, that anything he ate she had to ask me about first. She said yes to everything, that of course, not to worry, that she would take care of him as if he were her own son. Ethan was so happy when he left with Victoria and Lily. I remember he said goodbye to me with a huge kiss and told me, "I love you, Mommy. Get better." And I told him, "I love you more, my love. Be good." If I had known what was going to happen, I never would have let him go. Never in a million years. I would have gotten in that car sick and all before letting him go with her. I took medicine and fell asleep. It must have been like 11 in the morning. My phone rang at 1:30 in the afternoon, and when I saw it was Lily calling, I thought it was weird because she never calls me. It's always Victoria who calls. I answered, and the first thing I heard was Lily crying hysterically, like she couldn't even speak well, she was so scared. I sat up in bed with my heart beating a mile a minute, and finally Lily managed to say between sobs that Ethan was really bad, that he had red spots all over and that his face was swelling. I asked her where Victoria was, and she said she was driving but didn't want to stop the car, and I could hear Victoria in the background yelling at Lily to hang up the phone. I don't even know how I got dressed so fast. I literally put on the first thing I found and ran out of the house. I yelled at Lily to tell me where they were, and she gave me the name of a street that was like 10 minutes from my house. I got in the car and drove faster than I've ever driven in my life. I think I ran like 3 red lights. I called 911 while driving and told them my 4-year-old son was having a severe allergic reaction and that I needed an ambulance. The whole time I was thinking, please God, please, don't let anything happen to him, please. When I got to where they were, Victoria had stopped the car in a supermarket parking lot. I ran out and opened the back door, and there was my baby, my Ethan, with his face swollen, covered in red hives everywhere, crying and saying, "Mommy, I can't breathe well." Lily was next to him holding his hand and crying too. I grabbed the EpiPen from Ethan's backpack and applied it immediately to his thigh. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped it. Victoria was standing next to the car saying she didn't know what had happened, that Ethan just started turning red out of nowhere. The ambulance arrived in like 5 minutes, which felt like an eternity. The paramedics took Ethan and I got in with him. I told Victoria to follow us in her car. In the ambulance, Ethan kept crying and telling me everything hurt, and I could only hug him and tell him he was going to be okay, that Mommy was there. While inside, I felt like I was dying of terror. I called Ryan and told him what was happening. He was in a meeting, but said he was going to take the first flight back. At the hospital, they gave Ethan more medication, and little by little, he started to improve. The doctors told me he had had a severe anaphylactic reaction, and that if I hadn't arrived when I did and hadn't had the EpiPen, things could have been much worse. Those words stayed etched in my head. Much worse. I mean, worse than this, which was already a nightmare. I asked Ethan what he had eaten, but he was so scared and confused he couldn't speak well. Victoria arrived at the hospital with Lily and started with the same story that she didn't understand what had happened, that she hadn't given Ethan anything weird. And then Lily, my beautiful and brave niece, grabbed my hand and pulled me aside. She looked at me with those big eyes full of tears and told me, "Aunt Jennifer, Mommy gave Ethan a peanut butter sandwich." She told him he had to eat it, and when Ethan said he couldn't, she shoved it in his mouth. I told Mommy that Ethan couldn't eat that you had said it was dangerous, but Mommy said it was nonsense, and that Ethan was a spoiled kid who needed to learn not to be so special. Everything went red in that moment. I looked at Victoria, who had gone pale as a ghost, and before I could think about what I was doing, I was already crossing the hospital hallway toward her. I yelled at her that she had almost killed my son. How dare she? That I had specifically told her about his allergy. And then I did something I don't regret but probably shouldn't have done. I slapped her. Not hard. I didn't hurt her or anything, but it was enough for the sound to echo in the hallway, and for everyone to turn and look at us. Victoria started screaming that I had attacked her, that I was crazy. But Lily ran toward me and clung to my leg, saying, "Please, Aunt, don't let Mommy take me. I'm scared." Hospital security had to intervene, obviously. They asked me to calm down, which was ridiculous because my son was in a hospital bed because of his aunt who had deliberately poisoned him. Victoria tried to take Lily, but the girl was holding on to me so tightly, they had to let her stay with me while they talked to Victoria. A hospital social worker came and started asking questions. I told her everything with Lily there to confirm the story. Later that day, When Ethan was more stable and Ryan had arrived at the hospital, I took Lily to a diner near the hospital because the poor girl hadn't eaten anything in hours. I bought her favorite chicken nuggets and a milkshake, and while she ate, she told me the whole story with more details. She told me they had been at the adventure park, and everything was going well, until it was time to eat. Victoria took out sandwiches for both kids, one turkey for Lily, and one peanut butter for Ethan. Lily immediately told her mom that that sandwich wasn't for Ethan, that Ethan couldn't eat peanuts, but Victoria told her to shut up. Ethan also said he couldn't eat it, that his mommy had told him to never eat peanut butter. And then Victoria, according to Lily, grabbed the sandwich and literally shoved it in Ethan's mouth while he tried to pull away. Ethan was crying and trying to spit out the food, but Victoria covered his mouth until he swallowed. Lily said she also started crying and yelled at her mom to stop, but Victoria told her to mind her own business. I can't describe what I felt when Lily told me this. It was a mixture of absolute fury, horror, disbelief, and a deep pain that someone in my own family could do that to my son on purpose. Because there was no way this was an accident. Absolutely no way. Victoria knew about the allergy. The kids had told her he couldn't eat that, and still she forced my 4-year-old son to swallow something that could have killed him. Ryan arrived that night. He took an emergency flight and got there like at 8. When I told him everything that had happened, he went pale, then red, then I think he went through every possible emotion in like 5 minutes. We went to see Ethan, who was already asleep, and Ryan just sat next to the bed and cried. My husband is one of those men who almost never cries. Like I've seen him cry maybe 3 times in all the years we've been together, so seeing him like that broke my heart even more. The doctor said Ethan had to stay in the hospital that night for observation, so Ryan stayed with him and I took Lily home with me. The poor girl was exhausted but didn't want to sleep. She kept asking if Ethan was going to be okay and if I was angry with her. I told her 1,000 times that none of this was her fault, that she had done everything right by calling me, that she was very brave. That night Lily slept in Ethan's bed, and I stayed awake all night thinking about what to do. The next morning early, Marcus, Victoria's ex-husband, called my cell phone. He told me he needed to talk to me urgently. We met at a Starbucks near the hospital while Ryan was still with Ethan. Marcus looked horrible, like he hadn't slept either, and he told me that Victoria had called his mom the night before, crying and telling her version of the story, where, basically she said everything had been a terrible accident and that I had attacked her at the hospital. Victoria's mom then called Marcus to tell him, and Marcus immediately knew something didn't add up. And then Marcus showed me something that changed everything. It turns out Victoria had called Marcus 2 days before the incident, super upset because she was short on money again, which apparently happened often. In that call, which Marcus had secretly recorded because he was trying to gather evidence for the custody case, Victoria had admitted that she resented that Ryan and I had a good life while she struggled financially. She said horrible things about Ethan, about how he was a spoiled and coddled kid, about how his allergy was probably invented by me to get attention. And then, in another call that Marcus let me listen to, Victoria was talking to a friend and literally said she was going to give Ethan peanut butter to prove he didn't have any real allergy, that it was all my drama. I sat there in that Starbucks listening to those recordings and felt like I was dying. I mean, one thing is to suspect someone did something terrible, but another very different thing is to have proof that they planned it. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a moment of carelessness. Victoria deliberately, with premeditation, decided to put my son's life at risk to prove a point. Marcus was crying while showing me the recordings, saying he was so sorry, that if he had known what Victoria was planning, he would have done something to prevent it. Ryan and I talked to the police that same day. We showed them the recordings. The hospital social worker provided her report, and Lily gave her testimony with a child advocate present. The police said they were going to investigate, but that technically, Victoria hadn't committed a crime according to our state's laws because there was no proven intent to murder, only to cause harm, which was a misdemeanor. But they told us to report to CPS because Lily clearly wasn't safe with Victoria. We called CPS that afternoon and filed a formal report expressing our concern for Lily's safety. We provided them the recordings, Lily's testimony, the hospital reports, everything. We also called Ryan's parents to tell them what had happened. At first, they didn't believe us. I mean, their initial reaction was that surely there was some misunderstanding, that Victoria wouldn't do something like that. But when they heard the recordings and when they saw how scared Lily was, they had to accept the truth. My mother-in-law started crying and saying she didn't understand how her daughter could do something like that. My father-in-law was quiet, like in shock. That night, I received a text message from Victoria. It was long and full of profanity, basically saying that I had ruined her life, that I had taken her daughter away, that everything was my fault for being a hysterical, overprotective mother. And at the end of the message, she wrote something that chilled my blood. She said that if she had known this would cause so many problems, she would have finished the job properly and made sure Ethan didn't survive. I screenshot that message immediately and sent it to the police and CPS. CPS acted fast after that message. They went to Victoria's house the next day and, after interviewing her and seeing the conditions Lily was living in, they decided to remove the girl from her custody immediately. Marcus got temporary full custody. And eventually, it became permanent custody because Victoria didn't make any real effort to get her back. In fact, when CPS asked Victoria if she wanted to work on a reunification plan with Lily, she said no, that if her own family was going to betray her that way, then she wanted nothing to do with any of them, including her own daughter. During this whole process, we kept discovering more things about Victoria that we didn't know. It turns out she had been using the child support money that Marcus gave her for Lily on herself. On clothes, on outings, on things for her boyfriend of the moment. Lily had been eating basically cereal and pasta for months because Victoria didn't buy proper food. Lily's clothes were old and too small for her, but Victoria had a closet full of new brand name clothes. Marcus had suspected something, but Victoria always had excuses, and the legal system generally favors mothers, so he hadn't been able to do much until now. Lily moved in with Marcus permanently, and we started seeing her regularly. The girl had constant nightmares about the day at the park. She would wake up crying, saying it was her fault that Ethan almost died, that she should have done more to stop her mom. Lily started therapy, obviously, and the therapist told us it was going to take time for her to process everything. Marcus thanked us 1,000 times for reporting to CPS, said we probably saved Lily's life because who knows what else Victoria would have done. Ethan also had to go to therapy. He was afraid to eat anything that didn't come directly from me or Ryan. He was even afraid to go to school because he thought someone might give him dangerous food. It took us months to help him feel safe again. He still has nightmares sometimes. He still gets nervous when he eats outside the home. The family split completely after this. My in-laws at first were very understanding and supported our decision to cut contact with Victoria. But after a few months, my mother-in-law started saying things like Victoria was her daughter, too, and that maybe everyone was being too hard on her. That maybe Victoria had had a moment of temporary insanity, but that deep down she wasn't a bad person, that caused a huge fight between Ryan and his parents. Ryan told them that if they wanted to have a relationship with Victoria, it was their decision, but that we weren't going to expose Ethan to someone who had deliberately tried to hurt him. We told them that if they chose Victoria's side, they couldn't see Ethan either, because we didn't trust that they wouldn't try to arrange some kind of reconciliation or tell Victoria where we were. My mother-in-law cried and said we were being unfair, that we were taking her grandson away, but Ryan stood firm. He told her she had to choose, that she couldn't have both. So far, my in-laws have kept their distance from Victoria, but my mother-in-law still sends her money sometimes, which bothers us, but we can't control it either. The relationship with them is tense. It's not like before. Family gatherings are awkward. Nobody talks about the elephant in the room. About a month ago, something happened that scared us again. Victoria showed up at Lily's school and tried to take her. The school had strict instructions that Victoria couldn't pick up Lily under any circumstances, so they called the police and Marcus immediately. Victoria made a huge scene, screaming that she was her daughter and that we had all brainwashed her. Marcus and I are now working on getting a more permanent restraining order, because obviously Victoria doesn't understand boundaries. Ethan is 5 now, and he's okay, physically at least. Emotionally, it's still a process. Lily lives with Marcus and we see her all the time. She and Ethan are super close. Lily still feels guilty sometimes, even though we constantly tell her that she saved Ethan, that if she hadn't called when she did, things could have been much worse. Marcus is considering moving to another state to put more distance between Victoria and Lily, and honestly, I don't blame him. Victoria is alone now, basically. Her family has mostly rejected her. Marcus obviously wants nothing to do with her. Her own daughter is afraid to see her. Sometimes I wonder if she regrets what she did, if she understands the magnitude of what almost happened to Ethan. But then I remember that text message where she said she wished she had finished the job, and I realize she probably doesn't feel anything but resentment toward all of us. Last week, Ethan asked me why Aunt Victoria doesn't come visit us anymore. I told him, because she made bad decisions that hurt a lot of people, and sometimes when someone hurts us, we have to stay away from them to be safe. He looked at me with those big eyes and said, "It's okay, Mommy. I like it better when it's just our little family anyway." And I guess he's right. Our family is smaller now, but at least it's safe. At least everyone in it really cares about protecting each other.